we're going to attempt to get the virtual robot through the robo500 challenge. So let's look at the challenge field. So this is what it looks like. It's a bigger square, which is the outline of the playground, with a square in the middle that's 1,000 by 1,000 millimeters. Your your virtual robot is going to start here in the bottom left-hand corner. You're going to travel in this direction. All right, so here's the requirement. The robot has to make one complete turn, of course, and then another two complete turns. So 3 complete turns to complete the challenge. And it can't go off the field. It can't intersect or hit this box. And I would like you to use while loops to complete this. So how do we do this in Virtual Robotics vexcodevr? All right, so first of all, we need variables. We need to control these while loops with indices. And let's name these variables. And so what you do is when you want to make a variable, you can simply grab one and set it here. And then you can name the variable. So for instance, let's call the first variable loops. How many loops is the robot going to make? All right, so because we need a second variable, because I want to make this code as simple as possible, I want one set of motion, the motion on this side of the square, to be just the same as the motion on this side of the square, the same as this side of the square, and this side of the square. It's all going to be the same code, but it needs to be repeated 4 times. This is what computer programs do well, is repeat the same code. So let's go here and click on Make a Variable, and let's call it side, the side of the square. All right, so now let's let's delay that for just a second. But at least we have this variable side to work with. All right, so we're going to set the loops to 0 because that's where we're going to start. We're going to try to do 3 loops. Okay, so here's his suggestion. This works much better because it's making so many loops to drive as fast as possible. So why don't we set the drive velocity and then change it to 100%. Okay, so we're going to now put in a while loop, and that while loop is going to control how many loops it makes through this course. So if we scroll down to while loop, by the way, you can click over here to get the group of code that you want, group of functions that you want. So here we go. We have a while loop, and now if we're going to control the number of loops, then we need a comparison. And how about we only want to do so many, so we want to do these, we want the virtual robot to work while it's less than something. So why don't we put loops, be the variable, the index to control this. Since we are starting at 0 and I want to do 3 complete loops, I'm going to make this variable 3 because the first time loop will be 0. The second time it goes through the loop, potentially if we changed the value of loops, then it would be 1. And if it went through a third time, the value of loops would be 2. All of those values are less than 3. That's why I'm using the constant 3 here. Okay, so now we have a big while loop. How many loops of the robo500 will be conducted? All right, so now let's work on the side. So first of all, we want to start with side 0. So why don't we set a variable called side to 0. Then let's add another while loop, this while loop within the bigger while loop to control the motion of each side. All right, so how can we control the motion of a side? Well, if we look from the 45-degree angle, we see there are walls on the sides of the playground. So why don't we use the front eye near? Okay, but we want to move while the front eye is not detecting an object, while it's not near. So we're going to use the not function here and then put the front eye detect which is a hexagon shape, as you can see, into that hexagon. So now the way this while loop will work is while the front eye is not detecting that wall, then we will do what we want to do. What do we want to do? We want to move. So the way this will work is as long as the front eye is not detecting anything, we will drive forward. But when do we want to do this? And then what do we want to do after? So maybe let's answer the second question first. After we drive forward, do we want to turn right? So why don't we, and we want to take a complete right turn. So again, this small while loop is just while the robot is not seeing anything. Once it sees something, it falls out of this while loop and then turns right. All right, now what I would like you to do is repeat this code, this simple code, for each side of the square. So instead of just repeating this and making a copy of it, why don't we make another while loop and have each turn through the while loop controlled by the number of sides that have happened. So we set side equal to 0, but what if we then compared, similar to the number of loops, but for the number of sides. So since we have 4 sides, but we're starting with side 0, then as long as the side is 0, 1, 2, or 3, we will have done 4 sides. Okay, so this is all fun, but this value of side is not going to change. This value of loops is not going to change. So what we need to do is we need to change the value. So every time it goes through this loop, every time it's done one complete side and then turn right, you want to increase the value of side. Let's change this to a side. So that this will eventually reach 4, and then this while loop will fail, and it will go on to the next loop. When it goes on to the next loop, well, we want to set side to 0 again so we can start from scratch. So we need to do the same thing with loops. We need to change the value of loops down here. So again, we're starting with 0, but every time this goes through the while loop, the value of loops in this biggest while loop gets bigger, and then eventually the value of loops will be 3, and this while loop will no longer execute, and then we will stop driving. And that's an illustration of how you can use loops within a loop.